Happy Election Day to all who celebrate and all who voted, which I hope is every single one of you watching. And the beautiful thing about being on YouTube and on Substack is that if you haven't voted yet, you can watch while you're in line waiting to vote. Across the country today, there are many consequential elections ahead of the Supreme Court, which in 2026 in June will gut the Voting Rights Act. But before then, we have elections in consequential areas like New York City, where I am, where the people have a decision to make whether they decide to support the oligarchy and their own oppression, or if they believe in the possibility of change. That is happening across the country right now. And in the shadows of the death of one of the architects of the war on terror. It is Tuesday, dear friends, and it is time for the Danielle Moodie Show. I am so glad that you all are here. Without further ado, let's get into it. Hello, damnation. I am so excited that you all are here. And to kick things off today, I posted a short video earlier about my feelings with regard to voting earlier this morning. And I have to tell you that it feels good to vote for something rather than against something. And I realize how important it is for people to have hope, particularly in this moment of immense darkness. And for those of us that live inside of New York City and those of us across the country, Zoran Mamdani's campaign has been the meteoric rise, not just of him, but of the people, of a candidate that actually believes in centering the needs of working people, working families, that has been able to utilize all of the tools of social media, of leather sole politics, which means that you just go. Knock on doors, talk to people, meet people where they are, whether they're in a senior citizens class, whether they're at a late night club, whether they're traveling on the subway, walking down the street, that you go to where the people are. Because ultimately, when the people have faith that change can happen, something incredible begins to rise inside of them. And that is called possibility. And that is what Zoran Mamdani's campaign has given people. Possibility. Possibility that they don't have to settle for the status quo. Possibility that their city can change. Possibility that the people, even in the presence of oligarchies and a fascist government, can still have a voice, can still create the kind of society that they want to live inside of. Now, I said in my video that is up right now on both Substack and YouTube that this election, any election, is not about one person. Your civic duty doesn't end on election day after you cast a ballot. It is when the real work begins. Because one man, one person, one woman cannot change decades, if not centuries, of systemic oppression. It is going to be up to all of us to actually roll up our sleeves, to get involved, whether that means to join in an administration, whether that means to run ourselves, to be vigilant in our communities, to be a presence and a force for good and for change. It doesn't mean that you vote and then you sit back and hope for the best, because we've seen now where that leads us. And that is a place that I don't want to stay in. It's called hell, right? You know how they say the road to hell was paved with good intentions? Well, that's how I feel about voting and voting alone, because voting alone doesn't save us. It just paves the path to hell. We, the people, have power. We, the people, still have a voice. We, the people, still can conquer evil and search for good. But we, the people, have to be consistent, have to be vigilant, and have to be persistent if we want to activate the type of change that we all deserve. That is my little PSA today as we wait on the election results in New York City and New Jersey and Virginia and across this country on Prop 50 in California, whether or not we, the people, can mount the kind of defense and offense against these fascists that want nothing more than for us to believe that their power is inevitable. And this election, as all elections are a reminder that nothing is inevitable until the people decide. So, switching gears, you know what I find that is just fascinating today? Waking up to the news of the passing of this man on election day. And that is the one and only Dick Cheney. Now, before there was a Donald Trump and the MAGA fascist reign, there was Dick Cheney, the architect of the war on terror, the axis of evil, the one and only Darth Vader. Before Donald Trump, the George W. Bush years were some of the most disgusting and criminal years this country has ever seen. And you see, I'm not one of these people who thinks to themselves, well, he's now gone, so let's not speak ill of the dead. I say that you speak about people and you show them in death exactly how they were in life. And so I'm going to tell you, courtesy of The Guardian, how Dick Cheney, the W years, paved the way for Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans. You see, the thing is that when you don't hold criminals accountable, when you just sweep things under the rug, when you allow for the erasure of truth because you want to preserve institutions, you make room for someone worse to come forward. And that is exactly what Dick Cheney and George W. Bush did. So in this piece in The Guardian up right now, Dick Cheney created the ground for Trump's excesses, despite their differences. This is by Robert Tate. He was the embodiment of America First ideals before Donald Trump, and his MAGA movement hijacked the phrase. The principle of a strong president empowered to push through the agenda was core to his view of how U.S. politics should function. Yet long before his death on Tuesday, Dick Cheney was deeply estranged from the Republican Party that had been his life's work and the person, Trump himself, who had single-handedly reshaped it in his own image. Along with his daughter, Liz Cheney, the former vice president who was once synonymous with right-wing Republican neoconservatism, became so disenchanted with the modern GOP and alarmed by the threat he believed Trump posed that he endorsed Democrat Kamala Harris for president in 2024. Now, I want to make a small aside before I go on with this piece, which is what I believe was one of the failures of Kamala Harris's campaign. Now, whether or not I believe that the 2024 election was free and fair is beside the point. What I do know is that Kamala Harris spent way too much time going around the country holding hands with Liz Cheney rather than embracing the progressives inside of the Democratic Party. You see, I, for one, believe that Kamala Harris was given the absolute raw deal. 107 days to convince America that it was no longer misogynist and racist after centuries of those policies being embedded into our culture and our psyche. But the fact is that in her limited amount of time, Kamala Harris wanted to do what establishment Democrats always want to do. Try and be the adult in the room when it seems that the toddlers are running the asylum. But the fact is that embracing Liz Cheney, whose only claim to fame outside of Republican circles is the fact that she was willing to observe the truth, which was that Donald Trump was a threat to our democracy and the Constitution, and that his acts on January 6, 2021 were abhorrent and needed to be held accountable and needed to show the American people through the January 6th committee exactly how Donald Trump presided over and invoked an insurrection. That's the only fucking good thing that Liz Cheney ever did. Outside of January 6th, Liz Cheney had voted alongside Donald Trump 90% of the time. So to then decide that with your limited amount of time to convince the American people to choose the woman of color to be the next commander in chief, you decided to hopscotch throughout the country, linking arms with Liz Cheney, which outside, again, of January 6th was the antithesis to what Democrats were actually fighting for. So I think that on her part and on the part of the people that were managing Kamala Harris's campaign, that was a critical miscalculation. And that instead, I'm fine if you want to bring Liz Cheney out to one event, but to make her a part of your campaign and a part of your tour to convince the American people with the limited amount of time that you had, it was poor judgment. Now, do I think that that is what cost her the election? No, I don't. But I think that it is important for us not to rewrite history when bad people sometimes make a good decision. And that is what Liz Cheney did, and that's what her father did. But her father, as I will remind you, and as this piece in The Guardian reminds you, laid the groundwork for where we are today. So for him in his later years to have the audacity to talk about the powers of the executive and how Donald Trump went too far, bitch, mirror, look at it. Because without your work with George H.W. and George W., we may not be here right now. I go on. For an entire generation, Cheney was viewed unambiguously and not inaccurately as the driving force and architect behind the U.S. invasions of Afghanistan, following the September 11 terror attacks, and in 2003 of Iraq, on the fallacious grounds that Saddam Hussein possessed weapons of mass destruction and had ties to Al-Qaeda. As vice president to George W. Bush, Cheney was an emphatic propagator of both theories and unapologetic when they proved wrong. Now, this is not just about Dick Cheney being proved wrong. Him being wrong about those two particular places, where the United States was for decades, cost the lives of thousands upon thousands of Afghanis, of Iraqis, and of Americans because he had a vendetta that he wanted to complete in the Middle East. And it didn't matter what the intel said. He was going to get the job done regardless. Both campaigns, Afghanistan and Iraq, resulted in long, bloody occupations that spawned bitter internal resistance, cost hundreds of thousands of Afghan and Iraqi lives, as well as those of U.S. and allied service personnel. The cost in national resources was immense. That Cheney was able to play such a defining role in America's early 21st century foreign policy was down to the relative inexperience in international affairs of Bush, who consequently gave his vice president broad, many said unprecedented, latitude, knowing that he had served as defense secretary under his father, George H.W. Bush. His influence in the second Bush administration was profound in other ways, being a key driving force to its unfolding war on terror that followed the 9/11 attacks and resulted within weeks in the USA Patriot Act. The legislation paved the way for a whole panoply of actions designed to counteract terrorism and prevent repeat attacks. Or, just a layman's way of looking at the Patriot Act, was a way to scare Americans into giving away pieces of their civil liberties as a way to keep them safe. That is what Dick Cheney did. And that is what Donald Trump is now using against the American people. You see, you lie about the intel that you receive. You lie about weapons of mass destruction. You use the fear of Americans seeing with their own eyes an attack on American soil that hadn't happened since Pearl Harbor. You tell them that in order for them to remain safe, that you need the government to be able to spy on you. And don't you worry, because if you're not a criminal, it'll all be fine. Who gets to decide who is a criminal and who isn't? I go on. The result was an anti-terrorism infrastructure that included the now notorious detention center at where? Guantanamo Bay. Secret rendition flights of suspects detained overseas, and enhanced interrogation techniques that human rights groups and others denounced as torture. Cheney may not have designed all of it or been the sole instigator, but he was closely identified with it in a way that exceeded any other administration figure, barring perhaps Bush himself. Far from minding, the hawkish vice president lapped it all up. He relished his publicly assigned role of being the administration's Darth Vader, joking that his wife Lynn said it humanized him. Against that dark aura, the ironies of Cheney's parting of ways with Trump and modern-day Republicans are numerous. His forceful personality and willingness to push his own agenda in the Bush White House brought about the forever wars that Trump later denounced and promised his support base would be avoided under his presidency. Yet so much of what Cheney believed and fought for created the grounds for Trump's excesses. The Patriot Act, for instance, may now be used to justify the current administration's actions against Venezuela, whose president, Nicolas Maduro, and leading officials have been designated by Trump as, quote, narco-terrorists, potentially subject to the same lethal actions that befell al-Qaeda figures like Osama bin Laden. Cheney was also an advocate of appointing some of the most right-wing figures in the U.S. Supreme Court, including the current Chief Justice John Roberts and Samuel Alito. He clamored for a more assertive executive, which he helped to implement and exercise during Bush's presidency. Yet under Trump, that vision has expanded in ways that Cheney could perhaps not imagine, helped in part by sympathetic rulings from the current Supreme Court that he played some role in shaping. Cheney lived long enough to see confirmation of the fears he experienced after the January 6th riot. So there is the groundwork. Dick Cheney, architect of the War on Terror, the forever wars that cost hundreds of thousands of lives, the creator of the Patriot Act that laid the infrastructure for civilian surveillance by the government. Now, he may not have ever thought, much like the founding fathers who created our co-equal branches of government could never have thought that someone who was not noble, somebody who was unpatriotic, someone who was a grifter, would become the president of the United States and create an entire cult around his image. They believed that country would always come before party. And they were wrong. Just like Dick Cheney thought that expanding the powers of the presidency was a good idea. You know, taking the handcuffs off and allowing for the president to do whatever they wanted to do outside of having to go through Congress. It didn't occur to him, of course, at the time that maybe down the road, a U.S. president would see the U.S. Treasury as their own piggy bank or turn the military against civilians. But you see, that's the problem with these politicians, is that it's all fun and games when they're in power, but they don't think about the misuse of that power long after they're gone. You see, the legacy of the Bushes is one that is wrought with crimes against the American people. Whether it was H.W. Bush and COINTELPRO, whether it was George W. Bush and the false invasion of Iraq. No one is supposed to be above the law. But once we allowed for Nixon to resign rather than face trial for his criminal activity, America set the stage for what would happen moving forward. From the lies that Reagan told that incarcerated countless Black men and boys, the welfare queen, the racist policies that would exacerbate the racial wealth gap, the war on drugs that would throw people away, drugs that the government put into Black communities as a way to perpetuate their for-profit prison industrial complex. No one was ever held accountable. And then you wonder and you think to yourself that Donald Trump kind of came out of nowhere. He didn't. He is what happens when you allow white, cis, hetero, rich men to run amok. And back on the campaign trail, Barack Obama is reminding people Basically, I told you so. And I want to play a brief clip of him saying such.
A year ago, I remember talking to folks who would tell me, this election doesn't matter. These are some well-educated, bright, people. They say, whoever the next president ends up being, it's not going to affect me. That's what they would say. If nothing else, the last 9 months should have cured us of that idea. Because the stakes are now clear. We don't need to speculate about the dangers to our democracy. They're here. We don't need to wonder if harm's going to be done to vulnerable people, or whether the public conversation will become meaner and coarser. We're witnessing it. Elections matter, and they matter to you, and they matter to your family. We are being tested, and what is remarkable about America is that it gives us the power as citizens to change this country. We all have more power than we sometimes imagine. We just got to use it. So if you believe in that better story of America, you cannot sit this one out.
You see, Barack Obama tried to tell people on the campaign trail a year ago. And now here he is again, campaigning for, hopefully, the next Democratic governor of New Jersey, the next Democratic governor of Virginia, trying to convince people of their power. And there are still some today that are going to sit out these consequential elections. And there are still some that believe, well, what does it matter? The Supreme Court is going to make this decision. We have the Electoral College over here. And all I have to say, folks, is that if our ancestors had that same sentiment, slavery's never going to go anywhere. It's a core part of the United States economic infrastructure. Women are never going to be able to get the right to vote. Gay people are never going to be able to get married. All of these things that people told various groups that couldn't possibly ever happen have happened because of the will and power of the people and the persistence and commitment to change. That does not mean that that change happens in your lifetime, but it means that you become a tool for that change to happen. Because you see, folks, we all have to remove our fucking egos away from what it is that we actually want to see, because it's not about us. And I am a person that does not have children, but it's for other people's children that I do this work. It is for other generations that we cast the ballots that we do. The vigilance that we need is something that we've never really had. I just laid out Cheney's fucking resume, which I'm sure that after Election Day today, you will see all of these in memoriam talking about how amazing Dick Cheney was, and he was an architect of this and a statesman and blah, blah, blah. But they won't tell the truth. And we allow people like him to just go about their lives because we're not always vigilant. because we assume that the people that we elect will continue to do the job even if we're not looking. And if there's anything that the last 9 fucking months, or rather 10 years of Donald Trump has shown us, is that when we look away, they rob us blind. They rob us of our hope, of our resources, of our power. And the only thing that stops them is when we take our heads out of the sand and recognize that we are stronger together than we are fighting amongst each other. The quote unquote culture wars that they have created to distract us from how they are breaking this country apart and selling it for pieces. Speaking of which, yesterday and on Monday, the breaking news was that two federal judges came out and told Donald Trump's regime that they needed to fund SNAP during the government shutdown. That there was, in fact, contingency money to the tune of $6 billion, I believe, that would allow for SNAP to be funded during a government shutdown. And Donald Trump said today, let them eat cake. Because Donald Trump went on social media and said he ain't funding shit until Democrats reopen the government. And he has threatened to defy the courts, putting us again into a constitutional crisis. I mean, frankly, we've been in crisis since January 20th. Trump threatened on Tuesday to deny food stamps for roughly 42 million low-income Americans until the end of the government shutdown, one that he started. A move that would defy a federal court that had ordered the administration to continue the aid payments this month. In a post on social media, Trump said that the benefits under the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program will be given only when the radical left Democrats open up government, which they can easily do, and not before. Hours after that ultimatum, bobblehead Barbie, the White House press secretary, appeared to walk back the president's comments. She told reporters at a news briefing that the administration, quote, is fully complying with the court and would provide partial food stamp payments in November. Quote, we're complying with the court's order and we're getting that partial payment out the door as much as we can and as quickly as we can, but it's going to take some time. Is that right? The whiplash on Tuesday only added to the persistent sense of panic and anxiety among the roughly 1 in 8 poor Americans who rely on SNAP, the nation's largest anti-hunger program. The president's comments once again raised the risk that these families could find themselves vulnerable to hunger and financial hardship, even though a federal court ordered Trump and his aides to restart nutrition assistance. And if you believe that it's going to take some effort to run people their checks, you are falling for the rope-a-dope, because this is all part of the plan. The weaponization of food, trying to blame it on the Democrats as opposed to who actually is running all 3 branches of government right now. Polls say that the people aren't actually falling for it this time. Because Donald Trump, remember, told us that he alone could fix everything. And now he's saying, oh, what, his hands are tied? Which one is it? Is he the all great, powerful Oz? Or is he just full of shit, as we know him to be? I tell you this. There is no shortage of people who are seeing the writing on the wall, whether it is those that are remorseful for their vote for Donald Trump now that they can't get food on their table, now that their healthcare premiums are about to go through the fucking roof. But there is one person that has been changing their tune and is now on mainstream television that I am still shocked by. And yes, I still have the ability to be shocked. But I've been talking about her for the last several weeks. And it is this person. Marjorie Taylor fucking Greene, who was on The View today. On The View. On The View, she talked about the fact that, she, like many other people, was duped by QAnon. She talked about the fact that her party is led by men who don't know how to lead. Marjorie Taylor Greene is on a rebranding campaign. She sounds more like a moderate Democrat than the rabid Republican we know her to be. And I'm telling you, don't fall for the rope-a-dope. But even a broken clock can be right twice a day. Marjorie Taylor Greene knows that Donald Trump is ill, knows that he ain't going to be around forever, knows that J.D. Vance can't fill those MAGA shoes because he's married to a brown woman, of course, until, he continues the setup of linking up with Erica Kirk. Marjorie Taylor Greene was the one that told us that she was not the fringe, but the mainstream of the Republican Party. And then the MAGA wave happened. And now she's in the midst of a rebrand, because I believe that once again, she sees the writing on the wall. Am I falling for her? Will I vote for her? Is she going to be able to redo her legacy of chasing David Hogg around Capitol Hill with a fake gun, taunting a child, a victim of a school shooting? Is she going to be able to erase from my memory Jewish space lasers? No. But I love some infighting. And I know a good fissure when I see one.
I think there's a lot of paid social media influencers. Mm-hmm. And I found it very interesting that they were the MAGA accounts, but they're all paid. Mm-hmm. And they all attacked me when I announced I was coming to join you ladies on The View. Mm-hmm. And I think that's very weak and pathetic. But when I talk about weak Republican men, I'm pretty much talking oftentimes about the leadership in the House and the Senate. Mm. And they're not getting our agenda done.
Did you hear the applause? You know that she doesn't ever attack Donald Trump, but she attacks the Republican leadership in the House and in the Senate. She hates Mike Johnson. But do you see the way that she is being welcomed on to these mainstream stages? The places, by the way, ABC paid out Donald Trump $16 million. Do you see how corporate media is complicit? Sonny tried to ask her some pointed questions about her past, but like I said, she sidestepped them, saying that, QAnon duped her like it did millions of other people, that she hasn't changed. She still believes in America first and strong conservative values. Marjorie Taylor Greene is a kook. Marjorie Taylor Greene is a racist. And yet The View welcomed her on, helping her to create the next phase of her political career. Pay attention, folks. Watch the moves that they're making, because it's important. And speaking of moves, remember yesterday how I told you about the crypto crook CZ that Donald Trump pardoned? and then claimed that he didn't know who CZ was or the platform that he created that allowed for children to be sex trafficked and terrorist plots to unfold on his platform, which is why he pled guilty to money laundering. But Donald Trump pardoned him, but then said that he didn't know who he was. And this was one of the main things that they wanted to attack Joe Biden of his auto pen and pardoning people. So Abby Phillips apparently remembered her journalistic integrity and asked Scott Jennings, a waste of space and skin, a pointed question about the crypto king that has now been pardoned and is in business with Donald Trump and his family. Jennings didn't really have much to say.
Okay, one man, right? So you're telling me that Trump has no idea that he pardoned perhaps one of the most prominent people to ever be convicted in crypto, a business that his family is deeply embedded in. Again, you want us to believe that that is not something that he would know or understand.
No, I don't.
And that if he didn't know and understand it, that would be okay with you.
I don't want you to believe anything, and I'm certainly not acquainted with all the details of it. I'm just telling you that I believe that the president probably doesn't personally know this person. I also believe.
I didn't ask if he personally
knew. I also believe that the president was probably lobbied
knew.
about this, and I believe that a group of advisors probably told him
that he knows
he was
that his
over-prosecuted by Biden.
Do you think he knows that his family is in business with his company?
I think he probably knows his family.
And you think that's okay? Do you think that's okay?
He got a recommendation.
Do you think that it's okay that he pardoned somebody that his family is right at this very moment in business with, and who shortly after that pardon sent out a message promoting the Trump family crypto business? You're okay with that?
No, it's totally above board, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, by the way,
there's nothing to see here,
guys. A for effort. I mean, I want to let you both know. I mean, look, this was great. Nora O'Donnell was like asking a tough question, right? She was like, hey, so there's this guy, he goes by CZ, he's a national security risk, and he was like, moving money for Hamas. And you gave him a pardon, and Trump was like pretending like he was with his best friend. He's like, hey, listen to this. I don't even know the guy. I know nothing about it. I mean, somewhere, obviously James Comer, my dear friend, who spent millions of dollars on this auto pen thing, is crying. When the speaker was asked this question, he looked like his IBS started to kick in front of the TV cameras. No, this undermines their entire message about Joe Biden, the auto pen, and not knowing pardons. And the one thing we don't have about Joe Biden? We don't have him on camera being asked a question. Do you know about this pardon? And Joe Biden going, no, nothing about it.
And then, because again, this was the entire premise around the auto pen and Joe Biden being old and not knowing what he was doing and just, pardoning people and yada, yada, yada. And Donald Trump got on national television on 60 Minutes and said that he didn't know who CZ was. The man that is in business with his family that just allowed their wealth to grow by $5 billion. And you're telling me, Donald Trump Jr. is in charge of that? I don't think so. So when this dum-dum was asked about, not knowing who was pardoned, listen to his bullshit response.
Manu, you get it first every time. This is not fair.
Last week, you came here to these mics, and you were very critical of Joe Biden's use of the auto pen, his pardons. You said you didn't even know who he was pardoning. But last night on 60 Minutes, President Trump admitted not knowing he pardoned a crypto billionaire who pleaded guilty to money laundering. Does that also concern you?
I don't know anything about that. I didn't see the interview. You have to ask the president about that. I'm not sure. Yes, ma'am.
He never sees anything. You ever notice that? He doesn't see anything. He don't know nothing. He's just sitting there like just a runny faucet of fucking lies. And it's, it runs in the MAGA circle because when a reporter asked Bobblehead Barbie about Donald Trump lying on social media today about California's Prop 50 vote, the election being rigged, a reporter asked, what evidence does he have of that? Bobblehead. There's fraud in California's elections. It's just a fact. Reporter. What's the evidence of that, though? Bobblehead. It is just a fact. If you want to deny that, I'm happy to provide you with all of the evidence. If, in fact, you have evidence that states that there is foul play, then by all means, fucking show the evidence. Just like you can tell us that the ships that Donald Trump, the boats that he is bombing in the Caribbean Sea are filled with narco terrorists. Show us the fucking evidence that you have. Because there would be no one that would come out if shown real solid evidence that this government is going after narco terrorists that would say, oh, well, even still, narco terrorists, by the way, still should get due process and be tried and not just blown up. But again, if you had evidence of wrongdoing, one that you could actually stand on, you think that they wouldn't be offering it up? You think Donald Trump wouldn't be fucking delivering that shit on Truth Social on a regular basis? They have no evidence. Everything they say is a fucking lie. Donald Trump said today, we're not going to pay SNAP. Bobblehead Barbie says, oh, we're going to comply. Which one is it? Oh, California is doing X, Y, and Z. Okay, where's the evidence of that? In my imagination. And what does their imagination actually lead to? Real people doing bad shit on their behalf. Earlier today, as people are lined up to vote, bomb threats briefly closed some polling sites in New Jersey. The threats, which officials said were hoaxes, came after 7 states reported receiving bomb threats on Election Day in 2024. Bomb threats that officials described as hoaxes were emailed on Tuesday morning to cities across New Jersey, disrupting voting and resulting in the brief closure or relocation of polling sites in some locations. Does that sound familiar to you? Because it's the same shit that happened during the presidential election, particularly in Pennsylvania and in some other battleground states. Polling stations closed, only some people let in. Donald Trump then wins all battleground states, the first time that a president had ever done so. Okay. Just food for thought, friends. Just food for thought. Well, that is it for me today on this Election Day edition of the Danielle Moodie Show. We are about to kick off Town Hall Tuesday for a few minutes because I am doing an event this evening in New York City for election night, and I need to get on my way. But I do want to give you wonderful people the opportunity to ask your questions for Town Hall Tuesday. Remember, type question in all capitals followed by your question, and I will do my best to get to them. I do want to shout out the super stickers and super thanks. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Ernst. And thank you, Amanda, for your donations to independent media today. And also a reminder, dear friends, that memberships are open on this channel now. There are 2 tiers. If you are looking for a way to support my work on a monthly basis, that is a way that you can do so by signing up to become a member. But know that regardless, none of my content will be locked behind a paywall. My information, my videos are open for all. But for those that have the resources and the ability to become a paying member, do consider doing so. Without further ado, dear friends, let's get into Town Hall Tuesday. All right, it is Town Hall Tuesday, so do write your question. Type question in all capital letters followed by your question. So, Electron Creations question: have you started writing your book yet? The answer is yes, I have. And hopefully, fingers crossed that it will be coming to bookshelves in the near not too distant future, but we will see. Put out good energy into the universe that that will happen. But yes, have I started writing my first book? I have. Next question: what event are you doing? So excited for them. I am doing an event today in Brooklyn, talking about the queer agenda for New York City. I'm excited about the event with Gladys Books in Bed-Stuy, which is a Black-owned, queer-owned bookstore. And that is where I will be. Next up. Question: did you hear about the Fed quietly injecting $50 billion into the banking system after hours last Friday? Have you heard any more about it? I have not, Norma, and I will look into that. I have not heard any more about that. But that is curious, isn't it? Who do you think JD will pick for vice president? I don't know. Peter Thiel? Elon Musk, Donald Trump, so that Donald Trump can have a third term. Who knows? I don't think that JD Vance is going to get that opportunity, but again, Donald Trump cankles not well. Do you think Trump will comply on only funding red states? I don't think that Donald Trump is going to comply with any court order, whether it is for red states or not. And just so that we all know, most of those food stamp recipients are in red states and are also white, contrary to the lies that right-wing media and Republicans have been perpetuating for decades. Because let's just be clear that if, in fact, SNAP and food stamps only benefited Black people, it wouldn't fucking exist. Question. Question: do you think Orange Chaos Goblin has somehow already spent the money in the emergency fund and that's why he won't agree to pay? No, I actually don't think that he has spent that money. I just think that he doesn't give a shit. And I think that this is their way to weaponize food. They are trying to pressure Democrats into accepting their bullshit CR, which is not a clean CR, and it will allow for the subsidies for healthcare to expire, only for them to then turn around and not want to create a deal around the Obamacare subsidies, increasing health insurance for millions of Americans. And so, no, I don't think that he's already spent the money. I just think that he doesn't give a shit. Question: is the New York vibe feeling like a Mamdani win? Fingers crossed. Because I don't believe anything until it's done, to be honest. And yes, like the energy feels good and it feels like New York City is excited. But I will not count my chickens or ballots before it is said and done. But I hope that Mamdani wins, and I hope that it injects some hope not only into New York City, but into the country about what we can do when we decide to take collective action against the oligarchs. But we will see. Question: have you read Kamala's book? If yes, what did you think? No, I have not read it yet. I've only read excerpts of the book. It is on my list. I'm reading so many books right now. I'm one of those people that read multiple books at one time. So I'm reading Sage Warriors by Valerie Kaur. I'm reading The Death of an Author fiction book by Nnedi Okorafor. I'm also reading Eckhart Tolle's New Earth. Like, depending on my mood, I read a couple of pages, a couple of chapters a week of each of those books. But her book is on my list. Question. Do you think Dems are secretly working with Republicans? This feels like an insane question, but everything is chaotic also. I mean, it's not an insane question. You had Elon Musk, Donald Trump, and Stephen Miller endorse who yesterday? Cuomo. Cuomo, who was supposed to be a Democrat, lost the Democratic primary to Zoran Mamdani, only to turn around and decide, oops, I'm not a Democrat, I'm an independent, so that he could finagle his way onto the ballot and then get endorsed by the worst people on the fucking planet. So is it far off to think that Democrats are working with Republicans to maintain the status quo where they both get paid by the same fucking billionaire oligarchs? I don't think so. I don't think it's far off at all. Question. You mentioned that you like Star Trek. What's your favorite series and or movie from the franchise? Ooh. Into the Darkness is my favorite. It's my favorite movie of Star Trek. Love it. Love, love, love. I will literally watch it at any point that it's on. Oh, great. Danielle, what was your experience of voting in New York today? It was easy. It's so interesting. Like, I was worried because I waited until election day to vote. In the past couple of years, I have been doing early voting. But, New York is not a red state, right? Or a battleground state as of right now. And so voting is very easy. There are no long lines. I think I waited maybe 10 minutes, but there were a lot of people that were in my polling station. It was incredible. All of the volunteers thanking people for showing up and caring about New York City and casting their ballots. So it was incredible. Again, like I said, I have a video up right now, a short that I did talking about how I was feeling. So do check that out as well. Looking for questions. When do I think the results will be in? Polls close at 9 p.m. And I think that if the polling stands, that it should be very easy to predict this win. But again, I don't want to say, that it's inevitable that Mamdani wins, for instance, in New York. So maybe it'll take a day or so. Looking for last questions. Again, please do write question in capital letters so that I can look for them. Will you listen to the Star Trek Con podcast on what? Oh, is there that exists? Oh, that would be exciting. I will look for it. Thank you. All right, dear friends. It looks like there are no more questions in the chat. This has been fantastic. Just an FYI, I have a new episode of The Fire Pit that is up right now on my Substack, The Damn Digest. So do check that out. It is a really good conversation that I had with author Danny Goldberg about his new book, Liberals with Attitude. And it is a retrospect on the Rodney King beating in 1991 and what it tells us about where we are today. It was a great conversation, and it is up now on my Substack. Folks, I will be back tomorrow here on the Danielle Moodie Show at 5 p.m. Eastern. I will also be on Substack at 12 p.m. Eastern with my friend Jared Yates Sexton for our check-in show. And then at 3 p.m. Eastern, I will be live for the midweek Democracy-ish on Substack. So do make sure to check that out. And again, folks, independent media. So do please like, comment, and subscribe. Feed the algorithms and help get me to 40,000 subscribers. We have hit 34,000, and I'm just so appreciative to all of you that continue to show up, share, like, and comment on a regular basis. I love this community so much. It gives me the fire that I need to continue moving each and every single day. And for those that are watching on Substack, do consider becoming a subscriber. Again, all free. But if you have a few bucks, consider becoming a paid subscriber on Substack or paid member of the Danielle Moodie YouTube channel. I will see you guys tomorrow. As always, power to the people, and to all the people power. Get woke, stay sane, and in these extraordinarily dangerous times, dear friends, do stay safe. I will see you back here tomorrow. Be well.